It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday morning. The sun had barely crept over the rooftops, and I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when the pounding started on our front door. Not a polite knock, a hard, urgent bang that rattled the frame. I opened it to find 3 HOA board members standing there, arms crossed, faces tight. One of them, a man I'd only seen a handful of times at neighborhood meetings, wasted no time. "You owe $20,000 in unpaid fees. You've got 5 minutes to pay, or we're calling the cops." His voice carried that sharp, self-assured edge, like he thought the threat alone would make me cave. I was stunned. 20,000? That wasn't just wrong, it was insane. I told them there had to be some mistake, but they weren't listening. The tallest one took out his phone, looked me square in the eye, and said, "Fine, we'll let the police handle it, and when they get here, they can cuff her and take her in." He jabbed his finger toward my wife, who had just stepped into the living room, still in her workout clothes. What they didn't know, what none of the HOA had bothered to find out, was that my wife had just been sworn in as the new police chief for our city. Less than 48 hours earlier, she had stood in front of a crowd, taken her oath, and pinned on the badge that now sat quietly in the pocket of her jacket hanging by the door. I glanced at her, waiting for a flicker of anger, but instead, she just gave me a small, almost amused smile. The kind of smile that said, "Let's see where this goes." Outside, one of the board members had already dialed the local precinct, pacing in the driveway like he was about to watch a show. None of them realized they were calling her own department. 5 minutes, they said. 5 minutes before the police showed up, and my wife was already reaching for her jacket. My wife slipped her arms into the jacket, moving slowly, like she had all the time in the world. The HOA crew didn't notice. They were too busy whispering to each other, clearly convinced they were about to witness some kind of neighborhood takedown. I stood there, trying to process how we'd gone from coffee and quiet to a threat of arrest in under 10 minutes. The truth was, we'd been on the HOA's radar for months, though never for anything this extreme. A few disagreements about landscaping. Rules a late fee or two when a payment got lost in the mail. But nothing that could possibly add up to $20,000. The number felt plucked from thin air, more like a weapon than an actual bill. Ever since a new group had taken over the board, things had shifted in the neighborhood. The rules became stricter, fines came faster. And it seemed like every week there was a new, urgent notice taped to someone's door. Most neighbors grumbled, but paid up, afraid of legal trouble. My wife and I weren't the type to roll over, and I guess that made us a target. Now here they were, escalating it to the police. I couldn't decide if they actually thought they were in the right or if they just wanted to scare us into paying without asking questions. Either way, they'd picked the wrong house on the wrong day, inside. My wife adjusted the badge on her belt so it sat just out of sight. "Let's just stay calm," she murmured, though her eyes had that sharp, focused look I'd seen before. The one that meant she was already working through the situation 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Outside, the man on the phone ended his call with a smug nod. "They're on their way," he announced, like a referee about to start a match. The others stood taller, feeding off his confidence. The air in the room seemed to tighten. Somewhere down the street, I thought I heard the faint wail of a siren. Starting up, my wife glanced toward the window, her lips pressing into the faintest smile. 5 minutes had just become 3. The siren grew louder, weaving through the neighborhood streets until it faded again, like whoever was driving knew exactly where they were headed. The HOA board members shifted, glancing toward the road, their expressions flickering between satisfaction and nerves. I could almost read their thoughts. They were picturing the moment they could tell everyone at the next meeting how they'd handled us. But the conflict here wasn't just about money. This was about control. The new board had been pushing boundaries for months, bending the HOA bylaws to fit their agenda. Rumors were floating around about selective enforcement, some neighbors getting fined for minor fence repairs, while others got away with full-on violations because they were friends with certain board members. My wife had been quietly looking into it even before she became chief. She knew things they didn't know she knew. I thought back to last month when we found an envelope slipped under our door late at night. No return address, just a stack of photocopied emails between board members, casually discussing ways to deal with problem residents. Our names were highlighted. That's when it stopped feeling like a neighborhood dispute and started feeling like something darker. Now, standing in our living room with 3 people ready to watch her get arrested, I wondered if this was their final move. Get us scared, get us out of the neighborhood, and make an example of us. My wife stepped toward the door, her movements slow but deliberate. The leader of the trio smirked, mistaking her calm for compliance. "Good choice," he said, as if the decision had already been made for her. From down the street, a dark SUV turned the corner, rolling toward us. Not the standard black and white patrol car I expected. The board members didn't seem to notice, too caught up in the anticipation. I caught a glimpse of the driver and recognized the uniform, but it wasn't the HOA's fantasy of an officer. Here to cuff someone, my wife's hand brushed against her badge again, still out of sight. The board thought they were minutes from a victory. They had no idea they'd just invited the wrong kind of backup. The SUV slowed as it approached, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. The sound of its tires crunching over the driveway gravel was the only thing breaking the silence. The HOA board members stood in a neat little row, like they were about to present their case to a judge. Their leader stepped forward, ready to greet what he thought was his ally. Inside, I could feel the shift in the air. My wife's posture straightened, her shoulders squared. She wasn't just waiting anymore, she was ready. Her eyes stayed locked on the SUV, watching as the driver's door opened with deliberate slowness. A tall officer stepped out, wearing the same department badge my wife now carried. He scanned the scene without saying a word, his gaze lingering on the HOA group just a little longer than necessary. The leader of the board puffed up his chest. "Officer, glad you could make it. We've got a situation here. This resident refuses to pay $20,000 in fees. We need her taken into custody immediately." His voice was loud enough for half the street to hear, and I could see blinds shifting in the houses across from us. Neighbors were watching. The officer didn't answer right away. He glanced at my wife, his eyes flicking briefly toward the badge tucked at her hip. It wasn't visible to the HOA, but I saw the flicker of recognition cross his face. His stance changed subtly, but enough for me to catch it. Still, my wife didn't speak. She let the silence stretch, the tension thickening with every passing second. The HOA members shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence starting to falter under the weight of the pause. Somewhere down the block, another vehicle turned the corner, this time a second SUV, moving faster. The board members noticed, their expressions tightening as they exchanged quick, uncertain glances. My wife stepped forward, closing the space between her and the officer. Her tone calm, but carrying an edge that cut through the morning air. The next words out of her mouth would change everything, and the HOA had no idea just how far out of their depth they really were. The second SUV rolled to a stop behind the first, doors swinging open almost in unison. 2 more officers stepped out, but these weren't from my wife's department. Our uniforms were different, their patches marking a smaller precinct from the next county over. The kind that sometimes got called in for mutual assistance. The HOA leader's grin returned instantly. "Good," he said, nodding toward them. "Now we can get this taken care of properly." His voice dripped with triumph. Like the arrival of these officers was proof he'd been right all along. But the look on my wife's face told a different story. She knew exactly who these newcomers were, and from the way her jaw tightened. She also knew something the HOA didn't. The county officers glanced between everyone, their expressions unreadable. One of them pulled out a folded document from a clipboard and began to read aloud. "We've received a formal complaint," he said slowly, "regarding misconduct by members of this HOA board. Allegations include harassment, extortion, and misuse of association funds." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The HOA members froze. The leader's smirk faltered, his eyes darting between the officers and his own people. "That's ridiculous," he snapped. But his voice had lost some of its force. The first officer, the one from my wife's department, didn't say a word. He just stepped aside, giving her a clear path forward. My wife didn't take it yet. Instead, she looked each board member in the eye. Her calm expression now sharpened with something else entirely. "I think," she said softly, "this situation just got a lot bigger than you planned." Somewhere nearby, I heard more engines. Not one, but several. The sound was growing louder, rolling through the neighborhood like a storm front. Neighbors were saying,